Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NicholasMcGirr.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's story in the cemetery. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 23. This week we're going to be discussing the Powder magazine at 79 Cumberland Street in Charleston, but of course I have to go through all of my housekeeping notes as you guys are already used to. It's been a crazy week here in Charleston as me and Brian McFarland have been getting closer and closer to finding the buried treasure cask from Byron Price's The Secret. And what I'll tell you is that we are on our way. And I really don't want to give up much more than that, only because we have taken the next steps in order to get closer to our dig site. But of course, we have some ideas about how to go about this first, and we have involved some other groups that are going to help us get closer. So we may discuss some of that on the next episode, but as you know, those episodes are bonus sponsored exclusive episodes on buymeacoffee.com. So if you'd like to sponsor this show and or support the show and my research of all of the hauntings and the paranormal evidence that I am always on the search for, head over to buymeacoffee.com. Search for Nicholas McGurr. Of course, I'll always have the link in the show notes. So look for that, and I'm super excited, guys. We're going to do another 1-hour episode, and that will be on February 6th. So for just $1 in the coffee pot, you can have access to all of those episodes. And technically, this will be our third episode, but our second sponsored episode. So be on the lookout for that. Of course, I'll put a preview up next Friday on the 6th. I will also tell you that my interactive ghost hunting experience tours are filling up for February already. So I talked last week about how it's been a little slow due to the cold weather, but people are starting to realize that the Groupon deal that we have right now is not one to really be passed up. So head over to Groupon, look for Charleston Cavalier Tours, and you will see my Stories in the Cemetery interactive ghost hunting experience. Right now, I believe it's on sale. I'm not sure how much longer it's going to be on sale, but I mean, it's discounted there anyway. So you might as well head on over, book it in advance. If you're planning a trip to Charleston, I believe we take bookings up to 6 months in advance. So even if you're looking to come to Charleston, for the summer, the spring, we're taking bookings now, and I'm starting to see the calendar fill up, just not on the same day, which is kind of nice. You guys are starting to plan ahead. That's good. I appreciate that, and I can't wait to take y'all ghost hunting, so make sure you book those tickets. Again, Groupon, look up Charleston Cavalier Tours, or just check out the link in the show notes. So, I'm not sure what's going on with Apple Podcasts, and maybe it's just because I do not have that many reviews on Apple Podcasts. I can't see them at this point, so if you're listening to this through Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave me a review. Let me know if you're able to do that. Otherwise, I'll have to stop, asking y'all to leave me reviews on Apple Podcasts. If you are listening to Stories in a Cemetery on Castbox, Stitcher, or my host, Anchor, make sure you're leaving reviews. It only helps people find the show. And of course, if you leave me a voice message on Anchor with any kind of ghost story, I will play it right here at the beginning of one of my next episodes. Let's dive into what we're actually... This is an interesting episode, folks. And by no means am I discrediting any previous historian, tour guide, or anybody else that looks for paranormal evidence. But this was a challenge of the Powder magazine. And let's talk a little bit about why this is such a challenge to try to find some evidence. This building is 307 years old. That's crazy to me. 307 years old. It's got the claim of being the oldest building here in Charleston, of course with argument with the Pink House being built a year before, but there's always an argument with the Pink House and the actual date that it was constructed. 307 years old. This thing has obviously seen some tragedy, some wars, and I put the list of wars up there. It looks like there's about 8 or 9 different wars that the powder magazine was involved with. Doesn't mean that it was fully supportive for the duration of these wars. It just means that it came in and out of these specific wars. And ones that stick out to me, of course, the Civil War. That's one of the huge ones. The American Revolution, the Stono Rebellion, the Yamasee War, which I've mentioned several times on other episodes that were linked to the Yamasee War. And again, you can see all of the guide panels that are inside this museum, because it's now a museum. It's not a very large building at all. It's more of a quick drop a few bucks, go learn some history about Charleston, and read the guide panels, because it literally walks you in chronological order how it served all of these different wars and its relevance to the Charleston history. So with that being said, it was built in 1713, 307 years, guys. That's crazy. So if you've never been inside such an old building, or even one 150 years old, you kind of get the gist of, what this thing might actually look like. But of course, I have pictures all over the blog post. Make sure you stop by there and check those out. But the interesting thing about this building is the way that it was built. It was built with 9 pillars. It's got 8 around the edge and then one big one in the center. And these pillars, the walls on this thing are, first off, are 35 inches thick. So this is a powder magazine, and powder refers to gunpowder, in case you haven't caught on to that. But if you're listening to this, you're probably somewhat of a history buff, and you know how things worked back in those days. But this thing the walls are 35 inches thick, and the pillars actually form a groin vaulted ceiling. So it's very interesting to see how all of that is laid out, especially when you're underneath the roof of it and inside the building, because the roof is filled with sand. So in the event that there was ever an explosion with the gunpowder, or it was, hit by an enemy cannon, the explosion from the gunpowder would actually be contained. And that was the purpose, and it was a genius idea to, construct this building that way, with the sand in the roof, the 35-inch thick walls. It's something to see. It's not very large, and it's easy to miss. So it's on Cumberland Street, which is across the street from a parking garage, which is, the ironic thing, is normally where I park when I'm hanging out downtown. It's right across the street from it. Not very tall, so it's not like you're looking up at the church steeples here. It's more of a, you gotta find it. It's at 79 Cumberland Street. So make sure, if you're ever in the downtown area, or if you're on one of my tours, ask me to point it out. I will tell you that I haven't really focused on the powder magazine with my tours, simply because I didn't know enough about the history of it, the hauntings. I've heard of the hauntings, but I didn't really know what they were, at least not until this blog and podcast episode. It is said that it can hold up to 5 tons of black gunpowder, which is quite a bit. When you're inside, you will see all kinds of panels that will explain how everything worked back then. Obviously, outside in the yard, there is what they call the pillory, which to us is kind of where you put your head and your hands in between the wooden blocks for punishment, which is kind of ironic, considering I don't believe that this was ever used as a jail. I think it was supposed to be used as a jail at one point in time, but it never was. Very interesting place indeed. Like this, when you walk in, it's obviously been renovated a little bit. You really can't see the originality of the floors and those kind of things, and of course the walls have been maintained. But this has been ridiculous, trying to pinpoint one haunting that could be attached to this one particular building. It's been through all of these wars. It has helped in all of these wars, has literally seen centuries of people passing in and out of Charleston. How could I possibly pinpoint what the ghosts are? Well, that's what Google's for. I started diving in, what are the hauntings of the powder magazine, and I came across the pirate ghost of Anne Bonny and Mary Read attached to this building. And I think at this point, we need to take a quick commercial break. And we're back, guys. Thanks so much for allowing me to put commercials in the middle of the show. It definitely helps move things along for Stories in a Cemetery. So, where was I? I teased you with the word pirate, and I did that on purpose. So let me get a little bit into the history of Anne Bonny and Mary Read. I've mentioned them before. I believe it was on the White Point Garden episode. And the reason I bring them up is because they were actually attached to Blackbeard and his whole story. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty details of their entire life. I am going to go into a little bit of Anne's history. So it is said that her mother was a servant and Anne was born out of wedlock, and she moved here from Ireland with her father, who happened to be a lawyer. Now, Anne Bonny married James Bonny, where the two became pirates, but she would soon leave James and meet up with Mary Read aboard the ship of Calico Jack, with whom she fell in love. The two were eventually captured, and I say two, meaning Mary Read and Anne Bonny, but once they were captured, they both claimed that they were pregnant, and they were released. Their detailed history after that is pretty much a mystery. So, historians out there, I've dug into the internet enough and read enough blog posts and watched a couple of YouTube videos and got the basic gist, but not one of their stories has ever been concrete enough for me to really feel that we know much more about these two young ladies, pirate women, however we want to call them, to really see where they could tie into the Powder magazine specifically. So I started looking into what's the proof and the evidence from the Powder magazine that says that Anne Bonny's spirit has actually been seen here. I didn't find one claim, I didn't find one picture, one video, I didn't find any of those things. All I have are claims from other people, writers like myself, that said that Anne Bonny's ghost is said to have been seen at the Powder magazine. That's all I got. Even the book that I purchased when I visited the museum, the Powder magazine itself, Arsenal of History, talks about Anne Bonny in the book. But I reread the page several times because nowhere could I see where Anne Bonny has a direct relation to the Powder magazine. It never said that her and her piratey friends came and raided the Powder magazine, or that they were jailed there, because I have reason to believe that this particular building was never used as a jail. I reread this page several times looking for a connection. And other than she came to Charleston, and which is speculative at best, based on the readings that I did, that she ever had a connection to the Powder magazine itself. There are claims that Anne Bonny's ghost and spirit is seen all over town, but again, with no real correlation of how or why. Normally, when I'm investigating any kind of paranormal anything, there's normally a tie between the spirit that is said to have been seen there and the building or location that they are said to be seen at. This is not the case with Anne Bonny. There's no tie, there's no correlation, there's no anything. Not knowing any of this, I went to the Powder magazine and I had my EMF detector with me, I had my spirit box with me, I had my spirit box app running on my telephone, on my cell phone, and I pretty much made myself well known when I got there to the folks running the place. And I told them, I'm here to look for paranormal evidence. Is it okay if I wave my EMF detector around and kind of see what the spirit activity is here? And they welcomed me. They were all about it. I asked them about this book, Arsenal of History, by Alan Stello Jr., and they pointed me right to it. I said it's a great read, and it is. It's an awesome read. If you want to learn all about the history of the Powder magazine and its influence on our Charleston history, by all means, pick up this book. It's a great read. It really is. Not to mention it's in color, which is also nice. But enough about books and authors. I didn't say stood there. I actually toured this place inside and out for a good 35 to 45 minutes. I get a little blip from time to time on the EMF detector. Nothing drastic, just one little extra light on the EMF K2. And I only got one word out of the Spirit Box app. I got absolutely nothing out of the manual Spirit Box. Complete static. Again, some of you may argue I did this during the daytime when it was open, and I need to be there at night with full access to the building. But to me, ghosts don't really know what time of day it is, and if they do, they don't care. That's my theory, and I'm going to stick with it. So, I mean, I was there, like I said, about 35 to 45 minutes. I'll be honest here, and it may not have been enough time. But with nothing coming through on the manual static box and only one word coming through on the app, and that word was writing. W-R-I-T-I-N-G, as in I am writing a book. I took that as kind of a clue that I need to look further into the writings about the powder magazine, and this is just context clues for myself, because that's what I do, is I take these words and I make them into clues for myself of how should I be interpreting this. How should I interpret these words? How can I piece them together? However, there were no words to piece together because there was only one, the word writing. So I took that literal, and I started diving into the writing about this place. And in the writing, there's no direct connection or tie that puts Anne Bonny anywhere near the powder magazine other than in the city of Charleston. I find it somewhat ironic, but at the same token, I can't really say at this point that the powder magazine is haunted. I'm not claiming it not haunted, but at this point, I don't have enough evidence in order to claim that it is. If you have direct proof or evidence, I would love to see it. I would love to watch your videos of shadows in the powder magazine's yard as you pass by at night, because it is closed pretty early. It is a museum. If you have been part of a paranormal investigation there and you have actual evidence, I'd love to see it. I'd love to watch, look at your photos, maybe kind of try to debunk them and prove them to be true. I would love to do that. If you have something, please send it over to me, because at this point I have absolutely no ties that says that this location is haunted. Now, I will tell you that during my interactive ghost hunting experiences, I do come very close to the powder magazine. Like I said earlier, I passed it by only because I didn't have enough history or enough haunting claims to say, hey, let's go check out the powder magazine. I will now be stopping at the powder magazine with my grid pen to look for any kind of abnormalities, my EMF detector, and of course my spirit box, in the event that I actually come across evidence and proof to myself that the powder magazine is actually haunted. I will definitely update this podcast, and I will update the blog with proof. That would be pictures, video, whatever it is that I need to do to prove that this place is actually haunted. Again, I don't want to discredit anybody else that's done a paranormal investigation here, because I haven't seen your evidence, because you haven't posted it. I dug for it online. It's not there. Guys, that's pretty much all I have for this week. I hate to bring a disappointment, but at the same token, when we're looking into these historical locations around Charleston and South Carolina, Georgia, and I hear legends and lore and myths of these great stories, I have to wonder what actually happened. Now, during the time that apparently these claims started in the early 2000s, I have to stop and think about what's been going on in the world to make these claims come true. Come about, not necessarily come true, but what was happening? And let's face it, the media had a big influence on pirates. We had Pirates of the Caribbean coming out in theaters with a big name actor. So if we add pirates to a historical building that doesn't have much interest other than to historians, and we need to attract the mass public, what better way than to add a pirate or two to a haunting tale and some myths and legends and grapevine effect and see how far it'll go? So for now, that's what I'm claiming, that's exactly what has happened. We took some pirates of the media because it was a big thing and we seen what a big blockbuster hit it was, and we attached some pirates that may have passed through Charleston and we put it onto a building that would attract more attention. Again, guys, that's my story. I'm going to stick to it until one of you proves me wrong. And as I told you before, I'm okay with being proven wrong. If I couldn't take criticism, then I wouldn't still be writing. Guys, that's all I got. Be sure to leave those reviews on Apple, Castbox, Stitcher, and Anchor, and let me know if you're able to leave a review on Apple. And, of course, book your ghost hunting experience through the cobblestone streets of Charleston before February is booked up. My email and my text messages have been coming through over the past few days. And, again, you can check out those deals on Groupon. Look up Charleston Cavalier Tours on Groupon, and you will find the direct link to the Stories in the Cemetery interactive ghost hunting experience. Guys, this has been a great January. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you guys next week on buymeacoffee.com. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in a Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.